All right. This is the last part of our ongoing series on the first chapter of Sanhedrin. It is part 36. And we are going to finish the chapter tonight. And then we are going to take the summer off and we'll come back sometime in August. I'm not sure exactly when. I hope to get back to you about that sometime over the summer. If people have specific input about when they would like us to come back or not come back in the summer. Okay. We are in the last few issues that were discussed in the Mishnah back at the beginning of the chapter. And so we begin with all right. Sorry. We begin with an issue which is kind of tangential, and then we're going to come back to and spend most of the rest of the evening on the requirements for what constitutes a Sanhedrin and where a Sanhedrin can be established. But first, Rav Kahana. So Amar Rav Kahana, Sanhedri shera'u kulal lechova potrinuto. So if you have a Sanhedrin, I believe this is either a 23 member or a 71 member, in which everybody votes for conviction, then that's an automatic acquittal. Hi, Tama, what's the reason for that? Kevan de Gemiri, because we have a tradition, Hanalat din lemeavad lezachuta, that we have a tradition of leaving the law overnight in order to make an acquittal for him, in order that, maybe if you sleep on it, you'll think of a reason to challenge the evidence or to argue in some other way for acquittal. So we make the judges sleep on it overnight. And if it turns out that everybody slept on it overnight and it didn't change anybody's vote, then they didn't try hard enough and a fair trial was not had. So the accused is automatically acquitted. So v'hani tu lo chazilo, and these people still didn't. The judges still didn't find a possibility of acquittal. So that's the end of that. Okay. Now going back to the requirements for the Sanhedrin itself. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Ein moshivin b'Sanhedri ela ba'alei koma uva'alei chochma uva'alei mar'eh uva'alei zikna uva'alei kshafim v'yod'im b'shiv'im lashon shelo tehei Sanhedri shomat mipi ha'meturgaman." So Rabbi Yochanan has a whole list, but he only explains the last item on the list. We're may have to just be left to speculate about the reasons for the other items. But you cannot seat on the Sanhedrin somebody who does not have the following qualities. They have to be tall, and they have to be wise, and they have to be attractive. I think Rashi indicates that being tall and being attractive just makes people take you more seriously and give you more credibility. That may be so, and if it is so, I wonder whether we ought to be encouraging that kind of thinking, but I don't know. In any case, presumably wisdom is itself inherently useful. And age is may also be inherently useful, although it doesn't say how old. Being an expert in magic, on the other hand, Rashi explains that way, if somebody is being enchanted so that they commit crimes that are not their fault, you'll be able to tell. I think you'd have to believe that magic was real in order for that to be a meaningful suggestion. And so I don't
question about that.
Yeah.
Which is, isn't magic a capital offense?
Yes. So that's the other reason that Rashi suggests, is that you need to know about magic in the same way as you're going to need to know about idol worship, so that you can know enough about it to know whether this person is guilty of it when you're trying them. And that is certainly a very reasonable requirement to have for the judge, but it would be weird for it to be on this list, because there are lots of other things you need to know about also, like, as I said, idol worship, that don't appear here. So I think that's why Rashi's leaning toward this other suggestion that it's not so much about trying people for magic as about trying to use an argument about magic as a way of acquitting people. But again, it's hard to use that as an argument if you don't think magic's real. In fairness, most of the rabbis of the Middle Ages, and as far as I can tell, most of the rabbis of the Gemara, maybe all of them, did believe that magic was real. So it could still be Rabbi Yochanan's reason, even if I don't think that that's a thing. And then Rabbi Yochanan does explain his last requirement, which is that you need to know 70 languages. 70 is usually used as a sort of a generic big number. And we usually treat 70 languages as meaning like all the languages in the world. You know, and I know that there are today more than 70 dialects that are classified as independent languages. But first of all, it all depends on where you draw the line between a dialect and a language. And second of all, you only presumably needed to know the languages that a witness might show up in the land of Israel and need to testify in. And so a language that's only spoken in Japan was probably not in the time of the Torah or in time of the Gemara, probably not relevant. So 70 might be a reasonable estimate for the number of languages that were being spoken in the Roman Empire or in nearby empires that were trading with it. I don't know. In any case, because the Sanhedrin is not allowed to hear testimony from an interpreter, they need to have members, or as we'll see later, at least some members, who can understand the witnesses speaking in their own native language, whatever language that might happen to be. And so you need these very multilingual judges. And the reason for not accepting testimony through an interpreter is because we take much more literally than the American legal system the requirement to reject hearsay. And even if the original speaker is actually standing there and you're just repeating what they say, but in a different language, we would still call that hearsay unless you can understand what the guy's saying, which, since the whole reason you have a translator is because the person who you're translating from doesn't understand what the translator is saying, is not an unreasonable precaution. It does make you very dependent on somebody else's judgment about the evidence.
Deborah,
yeah.
that makes sense in that time, that you can't rely on a translator compared to today, because in our age, you know, we have technology that records.
Right. So you could have 25 different translations made and compare them, and
I mean, you could get to the bottom of it in
whatever.
a way today that I think in the ancient world, you know, when you have someone translating, and if that translator is really the only person who understands that language, I think there is kind of baked into that situation an unpleasant ambiguity.
Yeah, no, I think that's true, and my guess would be that we might have a different attitude toward it now. But there is, as you guys all know, that there is a difference between understanding something yourself and having it explained to you by a translator, and it's still the level of comprehension is still better if you can understand the original language. This is, by the way, what the Midrash assumes is the reason why Mordechai knows what the plot is against Achashverosh. Right? The Persian Empire is also a very large empire with a lot of, I mean, it's got 127 provinces. I would say 70 is probably a low estimate for the number of languages that would have been spoken across that many originally independent countries. And but Mordechai is, in the Midrash's eye, a member of the Sanhedrin from back when it was sitting in Yerushalayim before the Babylonian exile. And so he speaks all languages that there are, take that however you want. And so when he overhears Bigtan and Teresh conspiring in whatever language they're conspiring in, he's the only person who understands what they're saying other than the two of them. And that's how he's able to report them. So the Chazal assume that they can project this particular requirement anyway backwards forever, that this would always have been a requirement. Assuming that Mordechai is old enough to have been a member of the Sanhedrin already before the exile is a little bit harder unless you make him extremely old, because the Persians don't come in until quite a while after the Babylonian exile. But whatever, he is exiled with Yechonia, which is an exile of the aristocracy, so maybe. Anyway, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, "In Moshivim b'Sanhedrin ela mishio de l'taheret asheretz min haTorah." This is a very, very famous quote. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav that you can only seat someone on the Sanhedrin if they know how to make a halachic argument that a sheretz is tahor, using Torah argumentation from the Torah. Now, there is an explicit pasuk, series of explicit psukim. I put the citation in the outline at the end, in the book of Vayikra, saying explicitly the following animals are tameh when they're dead, and then lists 8 shratzim. And so to make a legal argument that a pasuk is not accurate is going to require a considerable amount of legal gymnastics. And it seems like Rav Yehuda, in the name of Rav, is requiring somebody whose legal argumentation is so skilled that they could effectively argue for anything, that up is down, down is up, the sky is yellow, whatever, and convince people. And then Rav gives an example of how he would have given this argument had he been asked. Amarav, ani adun va'atarenu. I will make a logical argument that will make it sheretz tahor. Ma nachash shememit umarbet tuma v'tahor. So a snake is not on the list of these 8 shratzim that the Torah says are tameh. But snakes, at least he's assuming we're talking about a snake that kills people. So snakes can be lethal to humans, and dead people are tameh. So a snake can produce tuma while it's alive by killing people. So, but the snake, once it's dead, is tahor. So if that's possible, if the animal that produces so much tuma while it's alive is not tameh when it's dead, then he makes sort of a kal v'chomer, sheretz she'eno mimit umarbet tuma eno din sheyehe tahor. So a sheretz, and these shratzim are things like geckos and mice. They're not dangerous things, which doesn't kill people and doesn't create tuma while it's alive. It certainly shouldn't be tameh when it's dead. Okay, then of course the Gemara has to note that, by the way, that's not true. I mean, a sheretz is in fact tameh, and there's a flaw in Rav's argument. Vilohi, by the way, that's not true. Midi dehava a kotz be'alma, because a thorn, or in this case, this must be quite the thorn, because apparently it can kill people, but okay, fine. A sharp piece of wood is not tameh, because a wood is never capable of becoming tameh unless it's a container. So a straight, flat piece of wood is not going to be tameh, but it could theoretically be sharp enough and hard enough to kill people. And so from that, we know that it's possible for something to be able to kill people and still not be capable of being tameh. So we're going to stick the snake in that category. And we're going to assume that it's not really connected one way or the other to the sheretz category. And we're just going to say, well, okay, yeah, some things kill people and they don't become tameh. We're not surprised by that. So since we're not surprised by it, we're not going to make a kal v'chomer from it. And the mouse and the dead mouse and the dead gecko are going to go back to being tameh. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. So now, having quoted Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav as saying one thing about the Sanhedrin, we'll quote him, the same people, about something else. Kol ir she'en shnayim l'daber ve'achad lishmoa in moshivin b'Sanhedrin. So we're actually kind of getting ourselves back on topic here by using the sort of language we usually use to go on a tangent. And any city that doesn't have at least 2 speakers and 1 listener, presumably in all of the 70 languages, you can't put a Sanhedrin there. So it sounds like we're now making a distinction between people who can talk in whatever language it is and people who can just understand it. And we're going to accept some of the number that we need being just people who understand, but we're going to require some speakers. Presumably somebody has to interview the witness also. Ube Beitar havu shlosha. In Beitar there were 3. Uvi Yavna arba, but in Yavna they had 4. These are other places that the Great Sanhedrin went to after it left Yerushalayim. It was in Yavna for a while. It was in Beitar for a while. A bunch of other places. And the 4 who were there in Yavna were Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yehoshua, Rabbi Akiva, and Shimon HaTimni, who was Dan Lifnehem Bakarka. He judged in front of them from the floor, which seems to mean that he's actually not qualified to be on the Sanhedrin. Rashi says it's because he's too young. So they wouldn't let him sit on the bench because he's actually not a member of the Sanhedrin. So he sat on the floor to participate instead because he's not actually officially a judge. But I guess they do need him there because he's one of their language guys. But notice that Beitar has 3 and Yavna has 4. So at least the Yavna situation does not defend Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, and the Beitar situation may not either if Beitar had 3 speakers. That's still more than Rav Yehuda Marav says is the minimum. So the Gemara challenges Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, saying, Meitive shlishit chochma revi'it ein l'mala himena. So this Braita says the 3rd speaker of 70 languages gives you wisdom, or is a sign of wisdom, and the 4th makes you supreme. There's nothing better than that. That makes it sound like they didn't list 2 at all. So it doesn't sound like 2 is a factor. It doesn't sound like it's good enough to matter. So that sounds like we think that Rav is wrong when he said that two speakers is good enough. But the Gemara says, Hu de Amar, Rav was talking, ki hai Tana de Tanya. He was talking like the following Tana, who teaches this Braita over here. Right? There are a number of ways out of a potential tiyufta. You just have to prove that the Amora wasn't arguing with a Tana. So one of the options is to prove that the Amora is taking sides in a dispute between Tanaim, which is what we're going to do here. Your other choices mostly involve reinterpreting one or the other so that they're not talking about the same thing. But here we have another Braita that says the same thing as Rav, so we're going to go with that. So he was talking like this Tana, who taught Shnia Chochma Shlishit Ein L'mala himena. It's the same as the other Braita, but with different numbers. The 2nd speaker of 70 languages is wisdom, and the 3rd gets you to the level that there's nothing above that. There's nothing better than 3. So it sounds like you don't even need to try to get a 4th judge once you've got 3 that can speak all of these languages. The other judges can have whatever language qualifications you want or not, because you've got enough once you have 3. Although presumably you need a transition plan in case you lose one of the judges that you've got. Okay. However, once we've mentioned Shimon HaTimni, remember he's the guy who's sitting on the floor because he's not old enough to be on the Sanhedrin. So he is going to appear in the Braita or in the statement that we're about to quote. And so we're going to get sidetracked into something that mentions Shimon HaTimni, and that is a list of all of the code words, I guess you could call them, that are used to cite various people not by name. Okay, so Lemedim Lifnei Chachamim, it was learned before the sages. That's Levi Mirebi. That's Levi learned it from Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Levi is a 1st generation Amora, so he would be learning from the author of the Mishnah. Danim Lifnei Chachamim, judged before the sages, or judging before the sages, that's Shimon ben Azai and Shimon ben Zoma and Hanan HaMitzri and Hanania ben Chachinai. These 4 guys are the ones who are described as judging before the sages. And Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Matni Chamisha. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak quoted 5 people who are judging before the sages: Shimon, V'Shimon, Hanan, V'Hananya. So he adds to Ben Zoma and Ben Azai and Hanan HaMitzri and Hanani ben Chachinai, he adds Shimon HaTimni that we just had. And presumably this is a list of guys who were precocious and who were in fact literally judging in front of the sages, meaning like they were sitting on the floor in front of the Sanhedrin, participating when they're not old enough to be allowed to sit on the bench yet. Okay. Next title, Rabotenu shebeBavel, our rabbis in Babylonia. That's Rav and Shmuel. Rabotenu shebeEretz Yisrael, our rabbis who are in the land of Israel. That's Rabbi Abba. Dayanei Gola, the judges of the exile. That's Karna. I actually don't think I've ever heard of him anywhere else. Dayanei de Eretz Yisrael, the judges of the land of Israel. That's Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi. Dayanei de Pumpadita, that's Rav Papa, the son of Shmuel. Dayanei de Neharda, Pumpadita, Neharda, and Sura are the 3 big learning centers in Babylonia. So we're going to hear those names a bunch of times. The judges of Neharda, that's Rav Ada Bar Minyumi. Sabi de Sura, the elders of Sura, that's Rav Huna and Rav Chista. This is, as you can see, a list. I'm just going to read through it, and there's not a lot to say about it. Sabi de Pumpadita, the elders of Pumpadita, that's Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Ena. Charifi de Pumpadita, the sharp ones of Pumpadita, that's Efa and Avimi, who are brothers, and they're the sons of Rechava. I do not know if that is a man's name or a woman's name. It sounds suspiciously like it might be a woman's name, but I'm not sure. Amorae de Pumpadita, Rabba Rav Yosef. The Amoraim of Pumpadita, that's Rabba and Rav Yosef. Amorae de Nehardae, the Amoraim of the people from Neharda, that's Rachama. Neharbalai Matnu, people from Neharbala taught, that's Rami Bar Barbi. I've never heard of him either, other than here. Amri Bey Rav, they used to say in the house of Rav, that's Rav Huna. But wait a minute, the Gemara says, interrupting itself, hold on. V'ha'amar Rav Huna, Amri Bey Rav, but I have a quote in which Rav Huna himself says they used to say in the name of Rav. So that can't be. It can't be. Rav Huna is not quoting himself in code. That doesn't make any sense. Ella Rav Hamnuna. It must be that we got our memorized list wrong, and it wasn't Rav Huna, it was Rav Hamnuna. And so when it says Amri Bey Rav, that's Rav Hamnuna. Okay, Amri B'Ma'arava, they say in the West. The West presumably is Israel. That's Rabbi Yirmiyah. Shalchumitam, they sent from there. That's also presumably from Israel. That's Rabbi Yosei Bar Chanina. Machuala B'Ma'arava, they laughed in the West. That's Rabbi Elazar. I was actually just on my way home just now listening to a Daf Yomi Shir from about 10 days ago. That's how far behind I am, in which the phrase Machuala B'Ma'arava appears. So when it says they laughed at it in the West, the person who's objecting or who's making fun of whatever it is that you've just quoted, that's supposed to be Rabbi Elazar here, but the Gemara again interrupts itself and says, wait a minute. Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina. Say, wait a minute, you just told me that they sent from there. It means I'm quoting Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina. But I have a text that says they sent from there, the message then begins, according to Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina, etc. So the words they sent from there can't mean I'm quoting from him, or it wouldn't say it twice. So that can't be right. So we must have gotten our list wrong again. Ela ipuch, rather, let's switch it. Shalchumitam Rabbi Elazar, Machachuela Marava Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina. So they sent from there, that's Rabbi Elazar, and they laughed about it in the West, that's Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina. Tosfot points out that there is also a text that says they laughed about it there, and then the sentence that's quoted afterwards contains Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina's name. So you would think that that would also be proof that this can't be him, but the Gemara does not address that. And Tosfot's not sure what to do with it either, as far as I could tell from reading it. Okay, so fine. putting aside our list of code names and people, back on topic. So we talked about who should sit on the Sanhedrin. Time to get back to a quote from the Mishnah that talks about where you should put the Sanhedrin, keeping in mind that what they called cities in the time of the Mishnah are considerably smaller than what we would call villages today. Okay, how many do you need in a city? Sanhedrin, and it will be fitting for a Sanhedrin. 120. Right, and it doesn't say 120 what's, but based on what follows, it seems very plausible that we're talking about 120 adult men, or possibly 120 learned men, adult men, or something. But a lot of the jobs that we're going to assign to these people are rabbinic or quasi-rabbinic positions, or at least positions that you would need qualifications for. So it's not any 120 people will do, but there are 120 roles that have to be filled in a city in order for it to have a Sanhedrin. So so what are all these 120 people doing? Who are they? We're going to go through them. So we're going to need the 23 judges who actually sit on the court. And then you need 3 rows of 23 students in each row to, I guess, be trained in the process of legislating and judging. And as time goes by, people get promoted from the student rows up to the front. We saw, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that we saw a case in which a court was deadlocked and we added judges. This is where you'd be adding them from the most qualified of the students, who I believe sit in the front row. And also, presumably, as people age out or die from the court, you're going to need to replace them from somewhere. Okay, so we've got that. That got us to 92. We've got effectively 4 rows of 23. That gets us to 92. Plus, we mentioned, I don't know, a few months ago, the requirement that in order to have a Sanhedrin, the city is going to need to have 10 batlanim, 10 idlers. And we talked about what these people are hanging around ready to do, whether they're just hanging around ready to make a minyan, somebody said that, or whether they're hanging around ready to do whatever civic duties are necessary for the city, or whether they're sitting around learning Torah all day. We discussed a number of possibilities then. I still don't know exactly what they're doing, but these are those same 10 guys. So they're the 10 idlers of the Beit Knesset, and that gets us to 102. And we need 18 more. Vishnei Sofrim, we need 2 scribes. These are the court scribes. Or we're going to have a different kind of scribe later in a minute, but these 2 scribes are the ones who are actually taking the minutes of what happens in the Sanhedrin so that there's a court record. Vishnei Chazanim, and 2, Chazan here does not mean a cantor or a prayer leader. It means a person who keeps order in the court, carries out court orders, that sort of thing. So I translated that as employees of the court. I believe the English Steinsaltz translates this as bailiffs. I don't know that there's the jobs that we give these people are not combined in the same person in our court system. Maybe marshals in the federal court system would be sort of parallel. Anyway, you need 2 of them, and you need 2 ba'alei dinim, 2 litigants, in order to be able to have a court case. There's shnei edim, and you're going to need 2 judges, 2 witnesses. And we've mentioned this before, but let's go back to it. There's a requirement that with testimony, in order to be valid, be capable of being disqualified by having the witnesses become zomimim. Edim zomimim are witnesses who, in their testimony, said that they saw something in a particular place at a particular time. And then 2 witnesses come and they testify not about the topic of your court case, but about the witnesses themselves, that no, you can't have seen that in Canton because at that time on that day you were in New York with us. And that testimony makes the first pair of witnesses into Edim Zomimim. You can do this in layers because the next pair of witnesses could show up and say, well, the second pair of witnesses can't have been in New York that day with the first pair of witnesses because they were with us in Toronto. And you can keep doing this forever. You believe the last pair of witnesses and then every other pair from there on descending. We do not require an infinite number of potential witnesses here, though. We only require the first 3 layers. So you need to have 2 potential witnesses, 2 people to make them zomimim, and then 2 people to make the second pair zomim. So you're gonna need 6 qualified witnesses here. That gets us up to 114. And then they quote a Braita, which explains some more people that we need. Vitanya, kol ir she'ein va'asarad devarim halalu, ein tamid chacham rashai ladur b'tocha. Braita says, any city that doesn't have the following 10 things, a Talmid Chacham is not allowed to live there. And presumably, in order to seat the Sanhedrin someplace, you're going to have to house quite a few Talmidei Chacham there. So we're going to have to fulfill the requirements of this Braita too. It's going to need Beit Din Makin Ve'onshin, a court that is capable of whipping people and punishing people. That doesn't add anything to our list because presumably the Sanhedrin that we already listed back at the beginning of our 120 people are that. And a tzedakah fund, which is collected by 2 and distributed by 3. Right, the 2 who collect are necessary because people don't necessarily want to pay their tzedakah taxes, and you need thugs to take the money from them. And then the 3 who distribute are going to form a beit din to decide who to give the money to, because you probably don't have enough to give it to everybody. So you have to do some triage. Any place you have decision making, you're going to need a court. So we need 3 for the distribution, and you need a beit knesset, and you're going to need a bathhouse, beit hamerchatz, and a beit hakisei, a public bathroom. By the way, we should, consider the way that the United States does not really provide public bathrooms the way that many other civilized countries in this world do. And we should consider that even back when they were outhouses, we thought it was really essential to provide them, and we should probably do that somehow. Although I do not run the world, but this is a democracy and we all kind of run the world. And you need a doctor and a bloodletter and a scribe. This scribe is a publicly available scribe who writes books for people, writes mezuzahs and tefillin for people, probably writes deeds and loan documents and things like that for people. But we're working on a private level with individual people. And a tabach, a shochet, umelamed tinokot, and a teacher of small children. And that, I believe, gets us the 6 more people that we need to get to 14. We have the teacher, the shochet, the scribe, the bloodletter, the doctor, and what did I miss? And the 3 people who are necessary to collect and distribute tzedakah. That actually gets you to 7. That's 1 too many.
Why doesn't it mention?
I'm not sure. Maybe that's why somebody took the slaughterer out. What, Harvey?
Why doesn't it mention a mikvah?
That's a really good question. It may be that in a world in which the in which the water, the drinking water that you're saving for the summer is saved in cisterns that are kosher mikvahs, that it's not a big deal because everybody has one on their roof. Right? The way that we handle drinking water has changed, and therefore we don't naturally have a cistern on. We also don't live in the Middle East where it's safe to have a giant container of water on your roof and a flat roof. But the fact that we've changed the way we handle water, and by we I mean like the last 1,500 years worth of our history, has caused us to need to on purpose build things to use as mikvahs. But if you were getting your drinking water either from a natural body of water that you could use as a mikvah or from cisterns that were kosher mikvahs. It may be that it wasn't necessary to build one. I'm not sure about that. That may be historically a later phenomenon. Not that people weren't using a mikvah, but that you had one anyway, even if you didn't build one. But I just got 221. And that, as I said, that may be why somebody has put parentheses around the tabach and removed him here. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Rabbi Akiva adds, Mishum Rabbi Akiva Amru, Af mine pera. Also, you need to have a variety of fruit available. Seems like an awfully specific requirement. Shemine pera mi'irim et ainai, because a variety of fruit lights up the eyes. I am not sure. I have 3 possibilities to offer here, and I don't know if any of them is accurate. It is possible that he just thinks that fruit is attractive to look at and nice to eat, and so you should have it in order to be a civilized city. It's possible he literally is talking about people's physical health and their eyesight, and that you need to have vitamins in order to be able to see, and scholars shouldn't live in a place where they won't have access to proper nutrition and they won't be able to see. Or he may mean metaphorical, lighting up the eyes. He may mean that you think more clearly when you're properly nourished. I'm not sure. But apparently Rabbi Akiva has a fondness for fruit. That's all I have here. Rabbi Nehemiah, back to the Mishnah again. Rabbi Nehemiah said that you need 230. I think this is the population of the city, not the number of the Sanhedrin, which I believe the Mishnah said was because in Parshat Yitro, when Yitro is giving Moshe advice about setting up his court system, which we'll get back to a little bit more in a few minutes, he has him set up judges of thousands and of hundreds and of 50s, and the smallest number is of 10s. So the smallest number of people you can be the judge of is 10. If we need 23 judges, they need 230 individuals to rule over. So I think that's how Rabbi Nehemiah gets 230 back in the Mishnah. Then we have a bright Tanya, Rabbi Omer Matayim V'Shiv'im V'Shiva. Rabbi says in the Breita you need 177. I did not see an explanation that I understood, or maybe even one at all, of where the number 277 comes from. Yeah, I got nothing. But the problem here is that we've got 2 Breitot. The first one says Rabbi Omer Matayim Shivim V'Shiva, and the second one says Rabbi Omer Matayim Shivim V'Shmona. Right, so the same person is being quoted. One is saying you need 277, and the other is saying you need 278. The Gemara says Lo Kasha Harabi Yehuda Harabanan. So you might remember, although it would be from several months ago, that we had this dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and the sages, that the sages said that a normal Sanhedrin has 71 judges on it, because they see the council of elders that Moshe assembles in the desert, which has 70 members, as being supervised by Moshe. So there's 70 regular elders, and Moshe is the 71st. As opposed to Rabbi Yehuda, who looks at that and says, well, there are 70 elders, and he's got 70 members on his Sanhedrin. So the Gemara here is saying that this dispute about what Rebbe said must be that somebody thinks that he thinks there are 71 members on the court, and the other thinks that he has 70 members on the court. So that's going to give you a difference of 1 in the total number of people that you need in the city. Okay, now back to Yitro. Tanu Rabbanan. V'samta aleihem sarei alafim, sarei meot, sarei chamishim, v'sarei asarot. So this is Yitro talking to Moshe, and he says, and you should put on them officers of thousands, officers of hundreds, officers of 50s, and officers of 10s. Which sounds like a strictly hierarchical arrangement in which you have an awful lot of judges. On the other hand, you have a very large population. We're going to work here with assuming that the population is 600,000. I want to give my usual disclaimer, which is A, that only counts non-Levite men who are old enough to fight, and B, the number isn't 600,000 anyway. It's 600,000 and change. I don't remember exactly how many, a few hundred. So in practical reality, there are then 22,000 and something Levites. and not to mention all of the women and children. So probably we really have something more like a little over 2 million, but we're going to use the number 600,000 as shorthand for how many people there are, and it just is. We'll swallow it, or at least I will. I'm trying to learn to live with the things I can't change. Okay, Sarei Alafim Sheish Mot. So how many officers of thousands would you have? You need, for 600,000, you need 600 officers of thousands. Sarei Me'ot, for officers of hundreds, you're going to need Sheishet Alafim. You're going to need 6,000 officers of hundreds, because, right, 600 times 1,000 is the same thing as 6,000 times 100. We can do that. Okay. Sarei Chamishim, how many officers of 50 will you need? Shem Asrei Elf, Shem Asar Elf. That's going to be 12,000. And Sarei Asarot, Sheshet Ribo, and you're going to have six 10,000s, which is 60,000. Sorry, officers of tens. And we're just doing straight division here, using, as I said, a shorthand number, not a real one, but whatever. Nimtzeu Dayane Yisrael Shivat Ribo Ushmonat Alafim B'Sheish Meot. So it turns out that the court system that Moshe puts in place in Parshat Yitro is going to employ 78,600 judges, which sounds like an awful lot of judges, unless you keep in mind that, as I say, they're judging a population of something in excess of 2 million, first of all, and second of all, there are no other municipal employees, right? So they're the judges, but they're also the police and the bailiffs and the jailers, and they're doing everything. So I don't know how many municipal employees it's normal to have for a population of 2 million, but this doesn't sound to me completely nutty. It does seem like if Moshe was doing the work of almost 80,000 people all by himself, then I understand why Yitro looked at that and said, this is not going to work, because yeah, that's not going to work. But it doesn't seem like a crazy number, and they showed us how they got to it. Just I think their numbers are low, if anything, by using their methods. All right, that gets us to the end of this chapter. Thank you for following me through this adventure over the course of a whole school year. Are there questions?
Yeah, Deborah, where does the number 600 even come from on Sarei Alafim?
We had, well, Sarei, the number 600 comes from the number 600,000, or 10,000s actually, Shishim Ribo, which we got that number in the census, or a number very much like that, both in the census at the beginning of Bamidbar, which we read 2 weeks ago on Erev Shavuot, and in the number at the end of Bamidbar that we will read in, I think, late July, early August, something like that, in Maseh, or Matot, whatever, at the end of Sefer Bamidbar. And they're not exactly the same number, but they're very similar. And as I said, in both cases, it's only counting soldiers. So that's adult non-Levite men over the age of 20, which, as I said, is not the whole population. Even people who are prepared to be snotty about children and women usually don't think that Kohanim and Leviim should be people.
Right, right. But
so it's just a shorthand. It's like saying that 6 million died in the Holocaust. You don't really mean that you counted all of the bodies and you're sure there wasn't one more. It's just a shorthand.
But those were the actual, those were officers.
Well, so that if we're going to have officers of hundreds or thousands, then we assume that for every 100 or 1,000 people in that group of 600,000, you need an officer.
Right.
So we're just dividing by 100 or by 1,000. It doesn't take into account, which would make the math very messy, the question of whether the officers themselves count toward the count of 100 or of 1,000. Because if they don't, then all of a sudden the division gets a lot less pretty.
Right. It is very pretty here. Very clean.
Theory.
What, Harvey?
Get involved in set theory.
Yeah. So I think that would be messy. It wouldn't be very easy to remember. And since, as I said, we started with an estimate to begin with, it's not worth making it messy. This is much easier to remember.
And so also in Jewish law, we could never have a unanimous vote for conviction.
Not for the death penalty. Whether you can have, I think you can have a unanimous vote for conviction for like a financial fine. Or like if you're deciding who something belongs to or something like that. But yeah, in a capital case, you can't have a unanimous vote for conviction because it means you didn't get a fair trial.
And that's what the first part was referring to.
Yeah.
Only for a capital crime.
Yeah, which, you know, we right now live in a country here in the United States where you can only get a capital conviction, or you can only, in fact, get a guilty conviction, even for a prison term, if there is unanimity. And, you know, each one has something arguing for it, but I think that most of the time when you compare the American legal system to halacha comes out with the moral high ground and total impracticality. I'm not sure if that's true here also. I don't know how much about how it would work.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mazel Tov, everybody. And I will see you back in the fall. I'm sort of leaning at the moment towards something in Baba Kama or maybe Baba Metzia, but we'll see. I'm also not sure exactly when, sometime in August. If you want to have an influence over either decision, send me an email.
Okay.
Have a good summer and have a healthy summer.
Thank you. You too. Everybody should have health and happiness and some warm but not hot weather, and enjoy yourselves.
Thank you so much. You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.